Hello everybody, Justin from Stillness in the Storm here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell below for further updates from this channel. And thank you Patreons and all of those who donate your time and energy and contribution and your efforts to making this Stillness in the Storm project what it is. So what you're about to see is an excerpt from a talk I gave at DisclosureFest 2018 on 11/11 in Washington, D.C. In this talk, I discuss your soul mission and how you activate that and what that actually looks like at a human level. You know, we hear this idea of your soul mission or spiritual awakening or catharsis a lot. And I feel like it's good to actually ground this into some everyday life experience, because it's very easy to slip into the idea that your own life is itself mundane or boring or maybe not as grandiose and as fantastic as what we would like to think of as a soul mission. Maybe you think a soul mission is something that involves telepathy or some type of energetic phenomenon. Maybe your soul mission, you think your soul mission relates to you making contact with some kind of spiritual essence or beingness, whether that be extraterrestrial, angelic, or some other divine entity. And all those things are certainly parts of what you might describe as a soul mission, if that's part of what your mission is. But in many cases, I would argue that a soul mission has many different aspects to it. And often it's the little intangible moments that we might not pay attention to that have the greatest impact in our lives. Now, this video that you're about to see is itself a kind of bootleg, in the sense that it was somebody was kind enough to record a live stream of this talk, and they uploaded it to to Facebook. So I was able to download that video, which is what you're about to see. So because you're missing the first portion, let me give you a little context. In the beginning of the video you're about to see, I asked somebody in the audience to share their personal experience and what they think of as an activation of their soul mission. And this woman is kind enough to relate an experience that she's having in relation to her personal projects. And this project is all about teaching children how to get over their fear of water and swimming. And this is an extremely fulfilling thing for her and very rewarding for the children, obviously, because they get to transcend their fear. So I would say that one of the big overarching aspects of your soul mission, in a grand sense, to really take not only a spiritual perspective that might pull from some body of spiritual work, whether that be the law of one or something more mainstream like Christianity or Buddhism or something like this. If we distill all of those bodies down, there's a type of core essence. There's a single meta message, you might say, that appears and weaves itself throughout all of these faiths, in my estimation. And that is that you pursue the activation of your personal mission through the expression of your values. So in effect, what that means at an everyday level is that you're pursuing your highest calling. You're following your bliss, to use a rather new age platitude. And what we're getting at here is that in the act of pursuing what you feel driven to do the most, what you have the greatest desire to do, what I would describe as your ideal, you're actually allowing yourself to incorporate what I term as spiritual values. And what these spiritual values, what they're essentially designed to do, they're kind of like ascension codes, if you want to think about it that way. They have these potentials, these things inside of us that are activating. And for us as human beings, that our spiritual evolution, the activation of our soul mission, is not something that just happens automatically. We live in a free will universe where we have to embody and incorporate our soul mission into our lives through our persistent, dedicated choice. And I would also go as far to say is that this choice is not something that you make once and then you never have to think about it again. It's something that you constantly are evoking and evincing in your life, something that you're constantly grabbing onto with all of your might, so to speak. And you're holding on to that kind of like a surfer rides a wave. And in the act of holding on to your soul mission and pursuing your highest calling, what often happens is the things that don't serve you anymore start to fall away. And you transform through the act of pursuing the thing that is the most valuable to you, the thing that is your highest ideal and your desire. And if you're honest about your soul mission and pursuing this work, then what you'll also find is that what you thought was your mission in the beginning often begins to grow and transform and become grander than what you originally conceived. So in my personal journey, I've had many instances where I thought the thing that I was going to do was going to be my highest calling, only to discover that it was itself a stepping stone to something far greater. And this is why being humble and open and receptive to what the truth of our experience is offering us is so vitally important and helpful in not only the greater development and the unfolding of our soul mission or a personal life activation, but also in the ability to transform who we were so that we can become who we were meant to be in a grand spiritual sense. So I hope you find this discussion rewarding and entertaining and uplifting. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy.
A little recognition, and I go from there and I work with them that way. And then most of the parents are closed off, so I can't explain to them why their child's afraid. But each child has learned to swim. So my whole list is all my kids now. They won't leave. They like me so much, so I can't get a new clientele to come in.
So they're finding reasons to continue to stay afraid of the water because they love you so much?
Yes, absolutely. They're afraid to go underwater. They're afraid. Each week it's different. So 1 step forward and then 3 steps back, and then I start again with this routine. So I have 15 kids on my list this winter, and over the summer I had 35. So.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so one thing thank you so much for sharing your story, by the way.
Yeah.
One thing in my musings about what a soul mission is that it has the power to activate something inside of us. We're literally changed when we know that we've come into our soul mission. And there's an idea called a spiritual awakening. I'm sure we've all heard of it before. Probably most of us have gone through a spiritual awakening. And I'm the kind of person, I really like to define terms. So I'm trying to figure out, how would I define a spiritual awakening? What would that even mean? Because it seems to mean different things to different people. So probably one of the best definitions I've heard was in the Urantia book. Has anybody heard of the Urantia book before?
Yeah.
It's really easy read, only a few pages. No, it's about 2,200 pages of extremely dense spiritual information. And they define the spiritual awakening as a complete shift of your perspective on life, but it doesn't necessarily add new knowledge to what you already have. It just makes you see the knowledge you already have differently. So it changes your perspective fundamentally. So in my thoughts about what a soul mission is and a spiritual awakening, I think they're really connected, because when we go through this shift in our perspective, it makes us see our lives differently, and then we have different desires. We have different things we want to do. I'm sure the experience you had changed your desires and your perspectives in life, right? I know my spiritual awakening did. In 2010, me and my partner at the time, we watched a movie called The Gerson Miracle. Has anybody heard of this before? It's about a man named Max Gerson who cured cancer in 1928. This is when he made the discovery. He was treating patients of tuberculosis, and he wondered if he could change their diet and remove some of the funky foods that they were eating. They're eating a lot of sausage and heavily processed meats. And if he could get them to eat vegetables and stop eating the bad food, he figured he might be able to cure them of their tuberculosis. Well, not only did he cure them of their tuberculosis, he also cured them of melanomas and colon cancers and stomach cancers and things like this, and various other health conditions. So when I heard about this, when I heard that there was cures for cancer out there, it completely blew me away. I thought I was somebody who knew about these things. I consider myself a fairly well-educated person. I was a very scientific person back then. I wasn't spiritual at all. I like to call it the scientific book thumping atheist. So when I came into this knowledge of cures for cancer, it completely shook me to find my foundations. And I actually spent 2 months, or actually 3 months. I bought Dr. Max Gerson's book. It was actually written by his daughter, Charlotte Gerson, The Gerson Therapy. And I read it trying to debunk cures for cancer. And I couldn't debunk the cures for cancer. As a matter of fact, while I was reading it, my scientific mind was buzzing because I was resonating with what I was understanding, but my we might call it my cultural mind was raging against this. So there can be no way there'd be cures for cancer, because 500,000 people die every year and people are suffering all over the world from cancer, and there's no way that there could have been a cure for cancer suppressed for all this time. Well, what ended up happening is I proved it to myself. I realized that there actually were cures for cancer. And that caused me to go through my first spiritual awakening in 2010. And then from that, I just couldn't stop researching things. I would research everything I could get my hands on. I said, if I was lied to about cures for cancer, I can't trust anything from everybody. I have to know from my own firsthand whether or not something is true or not, and then I actually have to know why it's true. And that caused me to rethink everything, because I had to ask myself, well, why do I even know if anything I know is true? How do I believe anything? Did I come to this conclusion myself? So this created a massive awakening inside of me, and it activated what I think is part of my soul mission. So I'm going to describe what I call the grand archetypal soul mission. And the grand archetypal soul mission is based on how the Creator created the universe for the purpose of expressing itself in the creation. So I'm going to just talk about some of these ideas, even if you don't necessarily believe them outright. I'm not asking you to believe them blindly or anything like that. I don't want anybody to believe anything I say blindly. I just want you to think about the ideas. Just allow yourself to entertain the concepts. So let's imagine that you're an infinitely perfect being. How are you going to experience your infinite perfection? Well, if you're an infinitely perfect being, you're a singular being. There's no other beings. You're in total unity. There's no way to actually experience really anything. There's no time. There's no space. There's just absolute, complete, and utter oneness. So that all sounds really great, but there's not really a sense of adventure. So let's imagine that this infinitely perfect being wanted to experience not only a sense of adventure, but it also wanted to experience itself. It wanted to go through the adventure of exploring itself. So what it did is it imagined a creation, like a dream. It imagined a place where it could rediscover itself from inside its own dream. And in order to do that, it created the opposite of itself. Now, when I say opposite, I don't mean evil necessarily. I mean the opposite of complete and utter oneness, which is finiteness. So the Creator, this infinitely perfect Creator, is so completely and absolutely unified that it can't know anything but that. So you might argue one of the first miracles of this process was the fact that something other than absolute unity could exist. Something other than complete and utter infinitude. And that's what we are. We have the capacity to experience finiteness. The fact that you can experience anything at all is a kind of miracle in with respect to the Creator. So how does this relate to the soul mission? Well, what our soul mission is, in relation to this scheme, is that we came into this world to experience a unique aspect of the Creator. The Creator split itself up into an infinite number of pieces. And each of these pieces is unique unto itself. It's very similar to a hologram. If you take a hologram, like the actual kind of holograms on a dollar bill or the new hundreds, if you see the new hologram, or the new hundreds, they have a hologram on it. If you take that hologram and you cut it in half, you're not going to get one half of Franklin's face and another half. You're going to get two parts of Franklin's face in a lower phi conception. And that's what's cool about holograms, is that they each, every time you split it up, it actually creates a lower phi version of that original picture. So what we're talking about here is fractality, or a fractal, or as above, so below. So the Creator created you as a perfect expression of itself, yet in a unique form, which means that only you can express your potential. And in a sense, since the Creator has everything already, I mean, what could you give the Creator? Well, your choice to accept your mission is actually the greatest gift that you can give the Creator.
Wow.
And the greatest gift you can give the creation.
So good.
Because in expressing your potential and actually finding your mission, you not only make your life better, but you make the lives of other people better. Just like we heard in the beginning with your beautiful story, thank you. Is that when you find your soul mission, it's all about making the world a better place, to put it simply. So as part of that process, the Creator had to create some scheme, some place where we'd actually have to go through the process of discovering that there was even a soul mission, that there was even a Creator. So we had to go from complete and utter unknowingness to the opposite. And if you think about that, that means that the adventure of finding the Creator, of finding the infinite, perfect splendor that is the Creator, really never ends. It just gets better and better and better as time goes on.
So good. That's so good.
So let's talk specifics here. So what do I mean by soul mission? The grand archetypal soul mission. Well, we came into this world into a body, right? Well, at least most of us did. I certainly did. And that body, that body is a culture of cells. Each cell in your body is actually an individual piece of consciousness that works with every other cell in your body as well. And that those cells have been gathering memories and information about Gaia for billions of years. So when you come into your physical body, you're coming into an organism that has its own consciousness. I call it the animal body. And your soul comes here to work with the animal body to actualize what I call the human consciousness. So we're going to talk about 3 separate states of being. We're going to talk about the higher self. Has anybody heard that term before? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, perfect. All right, I don't have to explain that much of it. So just briefly, the higher self is, I want you to imagine your perfect, completely actualized spiritual state where you've gone through all of the various life lessons you need to have and all the various incarnations you have. And you've gone through all of your growth. You've made all your deep internal challenges a reality, and you've gained all this wisdom, and you're in this perfect state. That's the higher self. So now we're going to talk about the animal self. So the animal self is the consciousness of your body. All those cells have their own little consciousness. And they've been learning about information, learning about how to live life on this planet for billions of years. So in a sense, you could say that it's been learning all of these things for you, because we don't have to think about digestion. We don't have to think about breathing, really. We don't have to think about our heart beating. All this stuff happens naturally. And what it actually is the perfect vehicle for us to express and discover this higher self. So the way this process works is we're born into this world, and our mother's consciousness, while we're in the womb, it actually provides a kind of template for this higher self to come in. So when you're in the womb, you're sitting there and observing your mother's experiences, and because of the psychological effect that's created, you literally can't differentiate between yourself and your mother. So you experience what your mother feels, what they hear, their thoughts, their emotions, their responses to the food that they're eating, all of that. You resonate with that as if it is you. And then when you go through the birth experience, that's the first time you start to have a discrepancy or a differential between who you are, baby, yourself, the animal self, and your mother. And that begins a slow process of synthesizing your human self, or the evolving soul. And the way that process works is by exploring and gaining knowledge of the truth. So everything we do in life has to pass through our knowledge and our consciousness. I call it a map of knowledge. So as you explore and gain information, You're actually creating your own personality based on what you explore, the field of ideas you explore. So when you go out there and you explore ideas and have new experiences, you're actualizing your personality potentials. You're making your soul physical. And the more we do that with open receptiveness and childlike innocence, the more we can absorb the truth of existence. So part of this scheme, part of this technique for actualizing your higher self requires that all of that is without must be reflected within.
Oh.
And we write that knowledge, we write that information into our consciousness. So I'll leave this here because I think I'm coming to a close. Hold on one second. So I could flap the lip all day long here. All right. By seeking the truth wholeheartedly, what you're doing is you're allowing your minds to absorb all of the pieces of information outside of you. And what's interesting is that your biology is literally seems pre-designed for this information. It's as if we're already set up like a hard drive to absorb all this information. And as we have these new experiences, it's like things are being activated, like codes in our consciousness. I'm sure people have heard of ascension codes before. So when you allow yourself to have these deep experiences, when you feel revitalized, when you feel that spiritual awakening, when you see the world differently, that's how you know you're making a step towards actualizing your higher self. Values play a role in this because values help us move forward. When we value spiritual things like fellowship, like camaraderie, like the truth, like integrity, when we do things that align us to our values, we feel good. We feel a positive emotion. And that changes us. It literally changes our consciousness. It changes our biology. We literally see the world through our values. So when we make contact with these spiritual awakenings, when you allow yourself an opportunity to have a spiritual awakening because you are receptive and open to the experiences you're having, which often requires a lot of forgiveness. If you were here at the beginning, I did a little thing on forgiveness. Then you unblock your consciousness and you're allowed to receive the truth more deeply. And through receiving that truth, you can catalyze or change the way you see the world and really activate your soul mission. But you have to feel it. So activating your soul mission isn't this kind of blind thing where we just wander around and everything just happens magically. I mean, it is a magical process, to be sure, but it requires effort. It's free will. We live in a free will universe. We have to choose evolution. We have to choose growth in this life. And that requires humility. It requires forgiveness. It requires letting go of things that we thought were true to embrace a greater truth. So I'll leave you with what I think is probably the most powerful affirmation that I've made contact with. I use it regularly throughout my day. And it's the consciousness of being open to receiving the fullness of experience. So what I tell myself is I drink deep from the cup of experience. No matter how bitter or seemingly sour it might be, I just drink it up. And I actually say this is a psychological trick you can use. So I want everybody to try this tomorrow when you wake up. When you wake up in the morning, I want you to get up and I want you to say, yes! Yes! And when you scream that out like that, you really feel it in your body, and you imagine all the stuff you're going to have to do tomorrow on a Monday. I know, I'm asking a lot here. You can feel your whole body change. You can literally, it's like a cup. You're just opening yourself up and you're being more receptive to everything that you're experiencing. Everything. Not just the good stuff, but all the stuff that you don't necessarily like either, because wrapped up in all that stuff that you've labeled as bad, as you've labeled as undesirable, are the seeds of a spiritual awakening waiting to be unearthed. Just like those children who learned how to conquer their fear of the water. Now they no longer fear the water. Now when they go to see the water, they're not in a state of fear. They're in a state of openness and receptiveness. And you can get into that state too. So thank you so much, everybody. And much love to you on this 11/11.